Museum and Art Center. Michael Rebman joins us. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
Hope you're doing well today and survived all the rains that we had last week.
We did, although it looks like there will be more rain coming up this weekend.
That's what we hear. As long as it doesn't happen Friday, Saturday, when we're trying to do all these outdoor events that we're covering this weekend, that would be nice. And then if it rained on Sunday, people are, either not doing anything or watching the Cowboys lose or something like that. So, yes, Jeffrey, I did say the Cowboys lose. So, all right. Well, last week you started talking about names of towns, names of streets, names of different names that are associated in historical perspective in and around Artesia. What you want to continue on that path?
Sure. Although I would like to just briefly divert away from that and mention that Monday was Indigenous Peoples Day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was looking for something interesting to talk about for that, and I did find here's something interesting to think about: dogs.
Okay.
Pre-Columbian dogs, the dogs that were here before Europeans showed up.
Okay.
And of course, there were dogs here because dogs were domesticated from wolves between 30,000 and 20,000 years ago in Siberia. So when humans first came to the Americas from Siberia, they brought dogs with them. And for a while, dogs and humans were stuck in northern Canada because of the glaciers. And so archaeologists were able to find some information on how dogs functioned within society to a certain extent. So they found things like burials, and they found objects, and they found that dogs were mostly used for hunting and for pulling sleds. So hunting, multiple dogs and multiple humans could easily take down a polar bear, situations like that. And sleds, of course, the sled dogs of Alaska and northern Canada. But after the glaciers melted and they started coming down to the plains and coming down to New Mexico, the dogs developed a wide variety of breeds, just like over in Europe. And as they got to places like Central America and Mexico, in South America, you started seeing dogs like short-haired and hairless small breeds of dogs that you can still find there. But in New Mexico, the Spanish explorers who first showed up here noticed that dogs were used as pack animals.
Okay.
The Apache people would take their goods, their items that they want to trade, their personal property, and even the poles of their homes, and they would strap them, put them in leather bags, and strap them to their dogs. The dogs would just move around with the humans.
So what was the big difference between, you're talking about the pack animals and how they were used here. How did the Europeans that had the dogs that came here, what did they do with their dogs?
Well, the European dogs were mostly for hunting and for guarding and for companionship, just like the dogs here.
Mm-hmm.
But since since there were no horses before, well, there were horses thousands of years ago, but the American horses went extinct. So for a few thousand years, dogs were used to pull things. They were used as working animals.
Okay.
And what they noticed was that the dogs here, there are of course a wide variety of colors, hair lengths, and shapes, but for the most part, the dogs of New Mexico were in two primary categories. The first was short-haired, kind of tan-colored dogs, somewhat short noses, that sort of resembled the Australian dingo, or the Japanese Shiba Inu type dog.
Okay.
And the other sort of dogs that the Spanish saw were a bit larger and had a longer fur that looked more like the Canadian Inuit type dog.
And what did most European dogs look like at that time? Or what did they also derive from wolves? Or I guess they did. But did they look different from the ones that they found here?
Well, they looked like just the sort of European breeds of dogs that you'd find in Europe at the time. And for that, I'm not well versed on European dogs of the 1500s.
Mm-hmm.
But there were breeds that were appearing, like the Mastiffs and the various types of setters and shepherds. So there was a large diversity of dogs in Europe, just as there was over here.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there was a group down in Argentina that domesticated a local breed of fox. But the Spanish didn't like it, so they were all euthanized.
Don't like it, get rid of it. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, which was unfortunately the case for most of the pre-Columbian dogs as well. They, just as there was no smallpox in the Americas, all the European dog diseases did not exist in the Americas, so American dogs mostly died out when they caught the European diseases.
Right.
In fact, the species of dogs that have survived have been like there's still some American genetic material in dogs, like the various small breeds of dogs in Mexico, the hairless dogs of Peru, and the Canadian Inuit dogs. There aren't a lot of them left, but some of them are still 100% American with no European genetic material.
Well, it's an interesting process. Of course, nowadays you have all these officially recognized breeds, and that's a big business now, and has been for a long, long time.
It is, and I'm not sure. I do not believe the Canadian Inuit dog is recognized anymore, just because there's so few of them left that they're worried about severe inbreeding.
Sure. Yeah, that would be a problem. So, did the indigenous peoples who were here, did they name their dogs? I'm assuming they did. They didn't just say dog.
Oh yeah, they did have names. With a lot of things in Spanish, they're not record that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, since they're pets, they were named.
Right.
And in fact, they had elaborate burials, just as humans did, so obviously they were well-respected parts of their families.
That's right. Yeah, no question about that. And that tradition obviously continues today. So this leads us to some other names that you'd like to talk about?
Yes, some names. I remembered from last week you were wondering about local hills, and
Yeah.
I looked into that, and there's a couple different explanations. The danger of finding explanations for names is that a lot of the definitions and explanations are created, so you never know which one is correct.
Right.
So there's some people who said that geologists described the rock formations and the oil presence as being crazy, so they called it the Crazy Hills. Some people have said that it's because they look much larger when you approach at certain distances, and when you arrive, it's just small hills.
Mm-hmm.
They called that crazy. The most likely explanation is that the area is full of loco weed.
Ah.
Of course, ranchers know all about that. It's a type of plant. It's found worldwide, and there's a native species in New Mexico, but it's really full of alkaloids. So when animals eat it, it stays in their system for a very short time, but it creates permanent damage in them. A lot of swelling and cellular damage that's never goes away and the animal slowly dies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the most likely explanation for the name.
They're a hilly area that had a lot of loco weed, and so people would say, well, I'll meet you over there, those local hills over there. So now that's not a incorporated town, is it? Is it just a unincorporated area, or does it have an actual?
It's unincorporated. I believe it has a post office.
Right. Oh, I know it has a post office. I've seen the post office there, but that's interesting. But it is kind of a stop along the way, or a place that you have to slow down a little bit as you're going from here to there.
Yes, it originally started as an oil camp in the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
It was called Smith.
Smith, okay.
At least that's the name that the post office called it, because there was a postal worker named Smith who started there, so they called it Smith, and then they realized that there were a couple other Smiths in New Mexico, so they went with local hills.
Got it. That's interesting. Well, it's always fun to kind of look back and say, where did that name come from? Where did that, just how did that happen? So, well, good.
It's interesting, too, to look for, like, names of the indigenous groups and tribes, because the history of those names are quite fascinating as well.
Okay.
Because for the most part, they were kind of like how the post office gave places their names without asking. A lot of the names of the indigenous groups in New Mexico came from the Spanish just assigning them names without asking them.
Okay, yeah. We're here now, so we're going to call it this.
So you'll find, of course, especially with the Apache people, they, as Southern Athabascan people, they came down from Canada, and shortly before the Spanish showed up, and they're spread out throughout the Great Plains. But the names they received were almost entirely Spanish words. So you'd find, starting in Nebraska, the Paloma Apache people, that's the Spanish word for doves. Then continuing south, you found the Cuartalejo Apache people, the old building, the barracks, because they settled down in central Colorado and started building their own towns. The Carolina Apache people, they had a chief named Carlos, so the Spanish kept on calling them that even after Carlos died. The Jicarilla, that's really interesting. There's a bit of division over that, precisely, because it's not a Spanish word, but it's a word that the Spanish adopted from the Nahuatl people of central Mexico. It can mean the makers of jicaras or chicaras, which are same word derived from Nahuatl word, which either refers to a type of gourd, and thus the baskets that the Jicarilla people made were named after that. Or it could be that a particular Spanish person mentions that they lived near the Sierra de Jicarilla, or Chicarilla, because they kept on going back and forth between how they spelled things, too, which meant a hill shaped like a basket, or shaped like that particular type of basket. So there's no way of knowing.
Right.
And then you find the mescaleros. That was a name that the Spanish imposed upon them because they noticed they ate roasted mezcal, agave plants. But they were also known as the farallones, which was a Spanish word for pharaohs.
Oh, okay.
Which is, the story for that is similar to the story for how the Romani people in Europe were called, this is a slur nowadays, gypsies. That, of course, was the medieval French word for Egyptians, and they saw these people wandering around Europe, and so they just looked through the Bible and found a passage saying that the Egyptians will wander the earth, so they thought, oh, they're just Egyptians.
Hmm.
And then the Spanish, when they came over here, they saw people traveling through the plains. First they called them the vaqueros because they were cowboys, sort of.
Right.
Even though they didn't have horses at that point. Then they started calling them carachos because that was a particular location out there. Then they started calling them pharaones because they were pharaohs. They were Egyptians of the Americas. So, names that they imposed upon these people without asking first. Although what's interesting is that groups in southern New Mexico and Texas, the Lipans and the Natajes, those were actually their own names, not Spanish words. Although, well, kind of the Spanish pronunciations of their names.
Of their names, yeah. Well, that might be a topic for another day down the road. What were some of the original names of these tribes before the Spanish imposed the names on them? Because were they all...
Well, that's actually quite easy. Just ask them. Their own names. All the various Apache and Navajo groups, they're all Southern Athabascan, and the words are all quite similar. Inde, Dine, Dinde, all similar names for the people as they refer to themselves. The names that people call them, like Navajo, that was a Tua Pueblo word for large field. Apache, there's actually multiple different potential explanations for the name Apache, but none of them came from the Apache people themselves. Like it could be a Zuni word for the word that they used to refer to the Navajo people. That was just kind of turned into the word Apache. There's another possible definition.
Sure.
The Yavapai people, that's the word for enemy, which is kind of, that's possible.
Sure.
A third one is that it's a Nahuatl word, Mapachli, which was turned into Mapache, and then Apache, which means raccoon.
Okay. Hey, we got about 5 seconds left.
Oh, goodness.
Museum hour?